the exiled crown prince of Iran, Raisa Pahlavi, saying this is Iran's Berlin Wall moment. He claims that military officers have been in touch with him to talk about defecting, that Ali Khamenei's family may be attempting to escape the country, and he's calling on the international community to back the Iranian people.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has very few fans in Britain or Europe. Yet on his watch, Israel has all but destroyed Hamas, decapitated and neutralised Hezbollah, established Israeli air superiority over Iranian skies, seriously degraded Iran's military machine, and with America's help, dealt a body blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions. So what does he do for an encore? Eylon Levy is a former spokesperson for the State of Israel, and he joins me now from Tel Aviv. Mr. Levy, let me start with this. The Israeli government, I would suggest, finds itself in an extraordinarily strong position. Is the logical next step not to do what it can now to bring about the demise of the Islamist regime in Tehran?
Really quite an extraordinary turn of events in the last 20 months, from the October 7th massacre, when Israel was its weakest and most vulnerable, to its strongest point in the Middle East, where it is attacking Iranian regime targets with impunity in Tehran. Now, Israel is saying officially the goals of the war are to neutralize the existential threat of the Iranian nuclear project and Iran's ballistic missiles. But no doubt everyone is aware the only path to enduring peace in the Middle East is if the Iranian people rise up, take their country back, and constitute a democracy. And I think what we've seen with recent Israeli attacks on regime targets, bombing the entrance of the infamous Evin prison in Tehran, the besieged, the secret police, other Iranian targets, is an attempt to encourage the Iranian people to rise up and take their country back. And for what it's worth, we've seen the exiled crown prince of Iran, Raisa Pahlavi, saying this is Iran's Berlin Wall moment. He claims that military officers have been in touch with him to talk about defecting, that Ali Khamenei's family may be attempting to escape the country, and he's calling on the international community to back the Iranian people if they do make a push for freedom and not abandon them, as has happened so many times before when they march through the streets of Tehran.
So what do you make of these reports we're hearing coming out of Israel this morning, that Israel may well have gone through its target list and it's obviously caused multiple humiliations for the regime in Iran, and that it might now stand back to see how the cookie crumbles? What do you make of that?
Israel's campaign against the Iranian regime in the last week has defied all expectations, and Israel is certainly making its way through the target bank, attacking nuclear facilities, Iranian ballistic missile launchers and facilities, regime targets, Iranian aircraft. It's prioritizing degrading the Iranian regime's ability to continue fighting back and shooting back in order to protect its nuclear assets. But this is not over. Just this morning, the Iranian regime was able to launch ballistic missiles at Israel, sending the whole country into bomb shelters. And we know that those missiles have been targeted at civilian areas, destroyed a hospital, a cancer research lab, a treatment clinic for disabled children. And Israel is looking to neutralize that ballistic missile threat. But I think Israel is going to want to wrap this up very quickly in the next few days or weeks, while the Iranian regime is going to have an interest in trying to drag this out into a war of attrition, where with just one missile, it can send a country of 10 million people running to the bomb shelters. And perhaps the bigger threat, that it could try to exact vengeance by perpetrating terror attacks across the West. And of course, Western governments have warned so repeatedly about how the Iranian regime has been trying to sow chaos and instability within Western democracies.
If all the recent setbacks have to some degree destabilized the Iranian government, what can Israel and its allies now do to kind of help tilt it over the edge? In the end, it's up to the Iranian people to choose their government, but it could be that from the outside you might want to give a nudge to the existing Islamist regime just to make life that bit more difficult. What can be done to encourage that process?
I think, first of all, Western governments would have to make a decision that regime change in Iran is something that they want, that they come to a conclusion that it isn't possible to reach peace with a regime whose unofficial slogan is death to Israel, death to America. As the G7 said just last week, Iran is the principal source of instability in the Middle East. And that is why the campaign to defang the Iranian military and IRGC is so critical to bringing stability to the region. But I certainly imagine if the Iranian regime is cutting people off from the internet, make sure they have access to the internet. If dissidents are getting in touch with Western governments asking for support, see what sort of support they're asking for. But really, that's a strategic decision for Western governments to make if the Iranian people rise up to try to overthrow the Islamic Republic, whether that's something they want to support at all, or whether they'll throw them under a bus yet again.
You seem to have Mr. Trump's support when it comes to regime change, as he revealed in his social media, but you know Britain, you know Europe, they're very chary of things like regime change. They don't like going down that road at all. They're not even very happy that America has attacked the nuclear capabilities of Iran. But maybe that doesn't matter, because maybe Britain and Europe, in this ongoing crisis in the Gulf, maybe they're just mere spectators that don't matter anymore.
I don't know whether President Trump really is committed to regime change in Iran now. I think the much more important statement from him is that Iran must sue for peace. This is not a time to give the Iranian regime a lifeline. This is the time to tell it that its strategy of aggression throughout the region, of arming proxy armies in order to establish control through chaos, has to end, and we cannot go back to the world that existed before October 6th. And that needs to be the demand from Western leaders as well. The Iranian regime must make peace and end its policy of death to Israel, death to America. But I think it's clear the European governments are not relevant actors in this crisis. They attempted over the weekend to bring Iran to the negotiating table, and they demanded that Iran provide guarantees that its intentions are peaceful. The Iranian regime walked away from the table, saying that was unrealistic. And of course it's unrealistic, because Iran's intentions are death to Israel and death to America. And that is the root of the conflict. That is something Western governments have to come to terms with, that the Iranian regime is a theocratic and totalitarian dictatorship committed to this religious vision of the destruction of the state of Israel. And it must be pressured to sue for peace. We cannot walk backwards and allow the Iranian regime to reconstitute its military. And I think there is an understanding, though, among Western governments that the only real leverage they have to get Iran to peacefully dismantle its nuclear enrichment program is the threat of military action by Israel. Without that, if you take military action off the table, you simply have no bullets in your barrel to demand that the Iranian regime not complete its nuclear weapons program. Although now it's clear they've been either set back completely or the program has been completely destroyed.
Indeed. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Eylon Levy, joining me from Tel Aviv, former spokesperson for the State of Israel here on Times Radio.